The letter arrived on a Tuesday morning. It was the kind of gray, suffocating morning that made the sky look like a sheet of damp paper pressed against the world. Rain had fallen all night and left the streets slick and reflective, every puddle trembling with the cold wind that pushed through the narrow lanes of the town. Daniel Mercer did not notice the letter at first. He sat in his kitchen with a mug of coffee that had already gone cold, staring absently through the fogged window. The small house creaked occasionally, wood shifting in the damp air, like an old man stretching sore bones. The town of Bramblewood had that effect on houses and on people. Daniel had lived there all his life, though the town never quite felt like home anymore. Not since the accident. Not since Victor died. The thought crept into his mind like it always did, uninvited, cold and heavy. Victor had his best friend, or rather, his former best friend. The kettle hissed faintly on the stove as Daniel finally stood and walked to the sink. The morning silence pressed around him like a physical weight. Outside, somewhere far down the street, a dog barked once and then stopped abruptly. Daniel poured the stale coffee into the drain. That was when he noticed the envelope. It sat quietly on the kitchen table. Plain, cream-colored, unremarkable. Except Daniel knew it had not been there 5 minutes earlier. He stared at it. A thin line of unease slid slowly down his spine. The envelope looked older than the rest of the mail that had arrived yesterday. The paper was slightly yellowed, the corners worn as if it had traveled a long distance or waited a very long time. His name was written across the front in careful handwriting. Daniel Mercer, nothing else. No address, no stamp, no return name. Just his name. Daniel frowned. He walked slowly toward the table, the floorboards creaking beneath each step. Something about the envelope disturbed him in a quiet, almost subconscious way. It felt as if the object itself did not belong in this morning, or in this house. He picked it up. The paper was strangely cold. Not cool like normal paper cold, in a deeper way, as if it had been resting in a cellar or buried beneath the earth. Daniel turned it over. The flap had already been opened. A faint smell rose from it. Not strong, but unmistakable. Earth. Damp soil. Like the smell of a grave after rain. His fingers hesitated at the opening. "Don't be ridiculous," he muttered. Still, the hesitation lingered. Then he reached inside. The letter slid out slowly, the paper whispering softly against the envelope. One folded sheet. Daniel unfolded it. The handwriting struck him instantly. His breath stopped. The room seemed to tilt slightly around him, because he recognized it. He recognized it perfectly. It was Victor's handwriting. Daniel stared at the words. His heart began beating harder. Victor Hale had been dead for 3 months. Daniel himself had stood beside the grave. He had watched the coffin lowered into the ground. He had thrown the first handful of dirt. Yet the handwriting on the page was unmistakable. Slightly slanted. The exact way Victor always wrote. Daniel swallowed and began reading. "Daniel, if you are reading this, it means I am already dead." Daniel's hand tightened around the paper. A cold shiver crawled along his arms. He kept reading. "I know this will sound impossible. You will think it is a joke or some cruel trick. But listen to me carefully. Something is wrong with the place where I am buried." Daniel felt the air in the kitchen grow suddenly colder. He glanced toward the window. The rain had started again. Thin drops sliding down the glass. He forced his eyes back to the letter. The grave is not quiet. It was not quiet even the first night. Daniel's breath grew shallow. His mind raced. This had to be some kind of prank. Someone imitating Victor's handwriting. Someone playing a sick joke. But why? And how had they gotten the letter inside his house? The words on the page seemed darker somehow. He continued reading. "I thought it was the wind at first. Or animals moving in the dirt above me. But it isn't that. Something else is in the ground with me." Daniel felt a sudden, violent chill. The refrigerator motor kicked on behind him with a low hum, making him jump slightly. He stared at the letter. The ink looked faded in places, as if the letter had been written long ago, or written under poor light. His eyes moved to the next line. "I can hear it digging." The kitchen suddenly felt too small, too quiet. Daniel glanced around the room, his pulse rising. The house creaked again. A slow, dragging sound echoed faintly through the walls. He swallowed hard. His eyes returned to the letter. "Daniel, listen to me. Do not come to the cemetery. Do not try to open the grave. If you hear anything coming from the ground," the sentence stopped. Daniel frowned. The ink trailed off in a thin, jagged line, as if the pen had been dragged suddenly across the page. Below it, there were more words, but they were written differently, messier, more frantic. The handwriting still resembled Victor's, but something about it felt wrong, almost distorted.
"IT knows my name now."
Daniel's stomach dropped. The last line was written in thick, dark ink that had soaked through the page. "It knows yours too." The kitchen clock ticked loudly on the wall. Tick, tick, tick. Daniel lowered the paper slowly. His mind struggled to make sense of it. Victor was dead. Dead. Buried. This letter had to be fake. A prank. Some cruel joke from someone who knew about Victor's death. But then another thought surfaced. A worse one. How had the envelope gotten inside his house? The front door was still locked. The windows had not been opened. The envelope had simply... Daniel's chest tightened. He looked again at the envelope on the table. Something inside it caught his eye. A small smear of dark brown dirt clung to the inner fold.
He touched it gently.
The soil crumbled under his finger. Fresh.
Damp.
The exact color of the earth from Bramblewood Cemetery. Daniel's throat went dry. Then thud. The sound came from somewhere beneath the floor. Daniel froze. The house fell silent again. He held his breath. Nothing. Just the faint ticking clock. Daniel forced out a slow exhale. "Old pipes," he whispered to himself. But the explanation sounded weak even in his own ears. He turned back toward the table. The letter was still there. The last word staring up at him. "It knows yours too." Daniel folded the paper slowly. His hands trembled. Another sound echoed through the house. This time softer, but unmistakable. A slow scraping noise, like something dragging across wood. The sound came from the basement. Daniel stared toward the basement door at the end of the hallway. The basement had been empty for years. He almost never went down there. The scraping sound came again. Long, slow, like something shifting through dirt. Daniel felt the blood drain from his face.
Because beneath the scraping, he heard something else.
A voice. Faint, muffled, as if buried under several feet of earth, but unmistakably human, whispering his name. "Da!" Daniel stood frozen in the kitchen. The whisper had been faint, but there was no mistaking it. It had said his name. The house settled into silence again, as if the sound had never happened. The rain continued tapping softly against the window, and the kitchen clock ticked with slow, mechanical patience. Tick, tick, tick. Daniel forced himself to breathe. "This is stupid," he murmured under his breath. His voice sounded too loud in the quiet room. The letter still lay folded in his hand, its edges slightly damp from the sweat of his palm. He stared down at it again, his mind fighting desperately for a rational explanation. A prank. That had to be it. Someone had slipped the envelope into his house somehow. Someone was trying to scare him. But that didn't explain the voice. And it certainly didn't explain the scraping sound. His eyes drifted toward the hallway again. At the end of it stood the basement door. A narrow wooden door that Daniel rarely opened. The house had been built nearly a century ago, and the basement was unfinished, just a low concrete room with dirt in places where the floor had never been properly sealed. Victor used to joke about it. "If there's ever a monster in Bramblewood," Victor had once said, laughing, "it's probably living under your house." Daniel felt a cold twist in his chest at the memory. Victor always laughed. Victor always made everything feel less heavy. But Victor was dead now, buried beneath 6 feet of wet earth. Daniel glanced again at the letter. "Something else is in the ground with me." His throat tightened. Then scrape the sound came again. Longer this time. Slow and deliberate. It was unmistakably coming from below. From the basement. Daniel's heart began pounding harder. "Hello?" he called weakly. The word sounded fragile, as if the house itself might swallow it. No answer. The scraping stopped. For a moment, Daniel considered pretending he hadn't heard anything. He could go outside, drive somewhere, anywhere. But another thought surfaced. What if someone really is down there? The possibility made his stomach knot. Someone could have broken in, a thief, or worse. Daniel set the letter down on the table. The paper seemed to stare up at him like an accusation. Then he stepped into the hallway. The house felt colder here. The hallway light flickered faintly overhead. Daniel walked slowly toward the basement door, each step deliberate and quiet. The floor creaked beneath him. The smell in the hallway changed slightly. Faint, but noticeable. The smell of damp earth.
Daniel stopped.
His chest tightened again. That smell shouldn't be here. It was the same smell that had clung to the envelope. The smell of fresh soil. He reached the basement door. The wood felt rough beneath his fingers as he touched the handle. He hesitated. Then the whisper came again. Soft, barely audible, but unmistakable.
Daniel!
His heart slammed against his ribs. The voice sounded wrong, not just muffled. Strained, like someone speaking through a mouthful of dirt. Daniel's hand trembled on the doorknob. "Victor?" he whispered. Silence. For several seconds, nothing moved. Then thump something struck the basement floor below. Hard. Daniel flinched. The sound echoed faintly up through the wood. Another thump followed, and then another. Slow. Heavy. Like something throwing its weight against the ceiling. Daniel's breath became shallow. He stepped back from the door. "No," he muttered.
No.
Victor was buried. Victor was dead. But the voice had sounded like him. Another heavy thump shook the floor beneath the door. Dust drifted faintly from the frame. Daniel's mind raced. He had to look. If someone was down there, he swallowed hard. Slowly, Daniel twisted the handle. The door creaked open. A wave of cold air drifted up from the darkness below. The basement stairs descended steeply into shadow, the wooden steps disappearing into blackness. Daniel reached for the light switch beside the door. He flipped it. The bulb in the basement flickered weakly. For a moment it glowed, then dimmed, then glowed again. The basement came into view. Concrete walls, old shelves, tools, nothing unusual. Daniel exhaled slowly. Relief began to creep into his chest.
"See," he whispered to himself.
Nothing. But then he saw the floor. The dirt patch near the back wall had changed. The basement had always had a section where the concrete ended and exposed soil remained. Victor used to call it the graveyard corner. Now that patch of dirt had been disturbed. The soil was loose, uneven, as if something had been digging upward. Daniel's stomach turned. He took a cautious step down the stairs. The wood groaned under his weight. The basement light flickered again. Daniel descended slowly, step by step. The air grew colder, and the smell of earth grew stronger. When he reached the bottom, he moved toward the disturbed soil. His heart pounded so loudly he could hear it in his ears. The dirt looked fresh, damp. Small clumps scattered across the concrete, as if something had pushed them outward. Daniel crouched slowly. His fingers hovered over the loose soil. Then the dirt moved. Daniel jerked back violently. The soil shifted again. A small mound forming at the center. Something beneath the ground was moving, pushing upward. Daniel scrambled backward across the floor. His mind screamed that this could not be happening. The mound rose slightly higher. The dirt cracked open. A thin shape emerged slowly from the soil. At first, Daniel thought it was a root. Then he realized what it was. A finger, gray, thin, and covered in wet dirt. Daniel's breath stopped. The finger twitched weakly. Then another finger pushed through the soil beside it. Then another. A hand slowly clawed its way up from the ground. The fingers trembled as they grasped at the basement floor. Daniel stared in frozen horror. The skin of the hand was pale and torn. The nails broken. The flesh darkened with decay. But Daniel recognized the ring. A simple silver band. Victor's ring. The one he had worn every day since college. Daniel's vision blurred.
No.
The hand gripped the concrete harder. More dirt collapsed inward. Something below it shifted. Then the hand dragged itself slightly forward. The fingers left thin, muddy streaks on the basement floor. And slowly, the wrist emerged from the soil. Daniel's mind screamed. This could not be Victor. Victor was buried in the cemetery, miles away. Yet the hand was unmistakably his. Then the voice came again. Louder this time, cracked, broken, but undeniably familiar.
Daniel?
The hand twitched. The fingers curled slowly toward him.
Help!
Daniel stared in horror, because something about the voice had changed. It still sounded like Victor, but beneath it there was another sound, a second voice, layered beneath the first. Low, wet, and hungry, whispering inside the same breath.
Daniel?
The basement light flickered violently, and then the hand suddenly snapped forward, grabbing Daniel's ankle. Daniel screamed as the hand closed around his ankle. The grip was cold, not just cold like skin exposed to winter air. Cold in a deeper, unnatural way, like something that had not felt warmth in a very long time. The fingers tightened. Mud smeared across Daniel's shoe as the hand dragged slightly backward toward the broken soil. "Let go!" Daniel shouted, kicking violently. The hand jerked but did not release him. Instead, the fingers dug deeper into his ankle, nails pressing painfully through the fabric of his pants. The basement light flickered again. For a moment, the room was plunged into darkness. And in that single second of blackness, Daniel heard something else moving beneath the dirt. Not just shifting, crawling. A wet, scraping sound like something large forcing itself through packed earth. The light snapped back on. The hand was still there, but now the ground had split open wider. More soil crumbled inward. Something underneath was rising. Daniel kicked again with his free foot, striking the wrist hard. The hand loosened slightly. He kicked again, harder. With a wet crack, the fingers finally slipped free. Daniel scrambled backward across the concrete floor, his breath coming in ragged gasps. He stared at the hand in horror. The wrist was now fully visible, and more dirt was falling away. The arm beneath it twitched violently, clawing upward as if something below were pushing it toward the surface. Then the voice came again, closer, stronger.
Daniel?
Daniel's stomach twisted. It sounded exactly like Victor. Exactly. The same tone. The same rasp in his throat when he was tired. But the words came out wrong. Slow. As if the mouth speaking them did not quite understand how human speech worked. The dirt collapsed further. A forearm emerged. The skin was gray and stretched tight against the bone. Dark veins spread beneath the surface like cracks in old stone. Victor's arm. Daniel knew it. He had seen that arm 1,000 times.
Seen it lifting beer bottles.
Throwing baseballs. Clapping him on the shoulder. But now the arm moved like a puppet, jerked upward in unnatural motions. The soil burst open wider, and then Daniel saw the face. At first only a portion of it appeared. A cheek, gray and smeared with dirt. Then an eye, half open. The white of it yellowed and cloudy. Daniel felt bile rise in his throat.
Victor!
The corpse dragged itself higher. Its mouth opened slowly. Dirt spilled out between its teeth.
Daniel!
Daniel's chest tightened painfully, because the face was unmistakable. Victor Hale. But something was wrong. Very wrong. Victor's expression looked empty. Not blank, not peaceful. Empty. As if whatever should have been behind those eyes was missing. The corpse pulled itself further from the hole. Its shoulders appeared. Its chest. The shirt Victor had been buried in was torn and soaked with mud. Daniel's heart pounded harder. This couldn't be real. This couldn't be happening. Victor's head tilted slightly to one side. His cloudy eyes locked onto Daniel. Then the mouth stretched into a slow, unnatural smile. The jaw opened wider than it should, far wider. The skin at the corners of the mouth tore slightly with a wet sound. And then the second voice spoke. From inside Victor's throat. Low, wet, and gleeful. Daniel. The corpse's head twitched sharply. Then it spoke again. This time both voices overlapped. Victor's weak, broken voice. And the other one beneath it.
Thank you, For...
Daniel's body trembled. "You're not Victor," he whispered. The corpse's head tilted further. Bones cracked softly in the neck. "Victor is here," the thing replied. Victor's lips trembled weakly. For a brief moment, something flashed in the cloudy eyes. Recognition.
Fear.
Then Victor's voice forced its way out again.
Daniel!
The corpse's body suddenly convulsed violently. Its back arched, its arms twisted. The second voice laughed, a deep, wet sound bubbling up from inside Victor's chest. Too late. The corpse began pulling itself fully from the hole. But as more of its body emerged, Daniel realized something horrifying. The thing climbing out was too large. Victor's body should have ended at the waist. But the torso kept rising. More limbs. Something thick and pale coiled beneath Victor's ribs like a mass of roots. Daniel staggered backward in terror. Because Victor's body wasn't being pulled out of the hole. It was being worn, like clothing. Victor's torso split slightly along the side with a wet tearing sound. And from inside the opening, something moved. A long, pale limb unfolded from within the corpse. Then another. Thin, jointed wrong. Like the legs of a spider made from human bone. Daniel screamed. The creature forced itself upward through Victor's body, stretching the corpse like a broken puppet. Victor's mouth opened wider in a silent scream. And then Victor's voice cried out one final time.
Ron.
The creature's limbs slammed onto the basement floor. Crack, crack, crack. Too many legs. Too many joints. Its body forced itself out of Victor's torso completely. Victor's empty corpse collapsed forward onto the floor. But the thing inside kept rising, tall, twisted. A pale mass of bone-like limbs wrapped around a dark, pulsing core. And at the top of it, Victor's head still hung loosely from a strip of torn flesh. The creature tilted the head toward Daniel. The cloudy eyes rolled downward, and Victor's mouth spoke again. But this time Victor's voice was gone. Only the other voice remained. Low.
Satisfied.
Hungry.
Now.
The basement light exploded. Glass shattered. Darkness swallowed the room. And in that darkness, Daniel heard the creature begin to crawl toward him. The letter from the dead man, part 4, the crawl toward the light the basement fell into darkness. Total darkness. The sudden explosion of the bulb left Daniel momentarily blind. Tiny pieces of glass still tinkled softly across the concrete floor, echoing faintly in the blackness like distant rain. Daniel's heart pounded violently in his chest. He couldn't see anything, but he could hear it. The creature was moving. A slow, deliberate scraping sound crept across the basement floor. Click, drag, click, drag. Too many limbs. Too many joints. Each movement sounded wrong, like bones sliding over concrete, like wet fingers dragging through mud. Daniel forced himself to breathe slowly. Panic would get him killed. Somewhere behind him were the stairs. If he could reach them, another sound broke through the darkness. Victor's head, still attached.
Still speaking.
But no longer with Victor's voice.
Daniel?
The creature's voice slithered through the dark like cold smoke. "You cannot see me." A wet laugh followed. "But I can see you." Daniel felt the blood drain from his face. The thing knew exactly where he was. The scraping sound moved closer. Click, drag, click, drag. Daniel slowly shifted backward across the concrete floor. Every movement felt dangerously loud. His hand brushed against something soft. He flinched violently before realizing what it was. Victor's body. The empty shell lay beside him, limp and cold. Daniel swallowed hard. Victor's head was gone now, taken by the creature. Used like a mask. Another scraping step echoed through the dark. Closer. Daniel's breathing grew shallow. He needed to move. Now. Slowly, quietly, he began crawling backward toward where he believed the stairs were. The basement smelled stronger now. Not just dirt. Something worse. A thick, rotting odor that clung to the back of his throat. The creature moved again. Faster this time. Click, click, click. The limbs tapped sharply against the floor. It was circling him. Hunting. Daniel's fingers brushed against wood. The bottom step. Relief surged through him. He slowly rose to his feet. The stairs creaked softly beneath his weight. The sound echoed through the basement. Immediately, the creature stopped moving.
Silence.
Heavy, expectant. Daniel froze. Then Victor's voice whispered again from somewhere in the darkness, right behind him. "Daniel!" The voice was inches from his ear. Daniel screamed and bolted up the stairs. Behind him, the creature exploded into motion. A violent storm of clicking limbs and scraping bone filled the basement. It was moving fast now, very fast. Daniel raced up the stairs 2 at a time. The creature slammed into the staircase behind him. Wood cracked. The entire stairwell shook. Daniel burst through the basement door and slammed it shut behind him. Immediately, something heavy struck the other side. Bang. The door rattled violently in its frame. Daniel grabbed the nearby chair and shoved it beneath the handle. Another impact. Bang. The wood splintered slightly. The creature's voice came through the door, muffled, still wearing Victor's head. "You cannot keep the door closed forever." Daniel backed away slowly. His entire body trembled. From the basement came a scratching sound. Not banging now, scratching. Like claws testing the wood. Then the voice again, soft, amused. "You heard him, didn't you?" Daniel froze. "You heard Victor begging you to run." The scratching continued. "But you didn't run soon enough." Daniel's eyes darted toward the front door of the house. Escape. He had to leave. Now. He turned and ran. The hallway stretched before him, dim and narrow. The house felt different now, colder, as if the darkness from the basement was spreading upward through the walls. Behind him, the basement door creaked. The chair shifted slightly. The scratching grew louder. Daniel reached the front door. His shaking hands fumbled with the lock. Finally, it clicked open. He pulled the door wide and froze. The rain had stopped. The street outside was empty. But something was wrong. The ground across the yard looked disturbed. Long lines of fresh soil cut through the grass. Thin trails, like tunnels carved just beneath the surface. Daniel stared in horror. The lines stretched across the entire yard, from the street to the house. Dozens of them, as if something underground had been moving beneath the soil all night.
Watching, waiting.
Behind him, the basement door cracked loudly. Wood splintered. The creature's voice echoed through the hallway. "Daniel." Daniel turned slowly. The basement door burst open. The chair flew across the hallway. And from the darkness at the bottom of the stairs, Victor's head rose slowly into view. The creature climbed the staircase. Its many pale limbs unfolded across the walls and ceiling like spider legs made of bone. Victor's mouth opened. The cloudy eyes stared directly at Daniel, and the creature spoke. "There are more of us." Daniel felt the world tilt around him. The creature tilted Victor's head slightly, almost curious. "They are waking now." Then the thing took another step forward, and Daniel realized something even worse. The trails in the yard were moving. The soil shifted slowly, as if dozens of things beneath the earth were crawling toward the house. The creature smiled using Victor's torn mouth. "You were the first name we learned." The thing wearing Victor's head stepped slowly into the hallway. Its limbs stretched unnaturally long, scraping against the walls and ceiling as it crawled forward. Each movement produced a dry, clicking sound, like brittle bones tapping together. Daniel stood frozen near the open front door. Behind him, the yard shifted. The soil trembled in thin lines across the grass, moving slowly toward the house. Toward him. The creature tilted Victor's head to one side, studying Daniel with the cloudy, lifeless eyes. "You see them now," it whispered. Daniel shook his head slowly.
"No."
Victor's mouth twisted into a smile that tore slightly at the corners. "You humans bury your dead so confidently," the creature continued softly. "You never wonder what waits beneath the graves." Another line of dirt in the yard bulged upward. Something moved just below the surface. Daniel's breathing grew faster.
"What are you?"
he whispered. The creature took another step forward. One of its pale limbs dragged along the wall, leaving a thin, wet streak behind. Victor's head leaned closer. "We are the quiet things below." Daniel's mind struggled to understand. "The quiet things," he repeated weakly. The creature nodded slowly. "You call this place Bramblewood." Its voice grew softer. "But before your houses, before your roads, before your cemetery," Victor's mouth stretched wider, "this ground belonged to us." Daniel felt a chill crawl down his spine. The creature continued moving closer, its limbs folding and unfolding across the narrow hallway like the legs of some massive insect. "You built your town above our tunnels," it said. "You buried your dead into our homes." Daniel glanced toward the yard again. More lines of soil were shifting now. More tunnels.
At least a dozen.
Maybe more. Something beneath the earth was pushing upward slowly. Daniel whispered weakly. For a moment, the creature stopped. Victor's cloudy eyes flickered slightly. A faint tremor moved through the corpse's jaw. Daniel stepped forward instinctively. "Victor, if you can hear me." The creature suddenly jerked violently. Victor's mouth opened wide, and Victor's voice burst out. Desperate, strained.
"Daniel, lift."
The creature convulsed. Its limbs thrashed against the walls. The second voice snarled from deeper inside the throat. Silence. But Victor forced the words out again. "They're inside the graves." Daniel felt his heart stop. Victor's eyes rolled downward toward him. "There were scratches inside my coffin." The creature twisted violently again, trying to suppress him. Victor's voice came out in broken bursts. "They wait until someone dies." Daniel's stomach dropped. "Then they wear the body." The creature screamed with rage. A horrible sound that shook the hallway. Its limbs slammed into the walls, cracking plaster. Victor's mouth snapped shut suddenly. For several seconds, the creature trembled violently. Then slowly, it regained control. Victor's head lifted again. The smile returned. "That was unpleasant," the creature murmured. Daniel staggered backward. "So when someone dies," he whispered. The creature nodded slowly. "We enter." Victor's head tilted again. "And we learn." The creature took another step closer. Its limbs stretched wider now, blocking the hallway, blocking the stairs. Daniel had nowhere to go except outside. But the yard was moving. The creature continued speaking. We learned Victor's memories. Victor's cloudy eyes stared directly into Daniel's. We learned his thoughts. A slow smile spread across the torn lips. And his friends. Daniel's chest tightened painfully. "That's why you sent the letter," he said. The creature nodded again. Daniel felt a wave of horror crash over him. "You used Victor's handwriting." "Of course." The creature leaned closer. Victor's face inches from Daniel's. "We needed you to come." Daniel's breath caught. "To come where?" he whispered. The creature smiled wider. "To the grave." Daniel's heart skipped.
"The cemetery."
"Of course." "Victor's grave." "The tunnels." The creature continued softly. "You were the closest, the one he trusted most." Another tremor moved across the yard outside. The soil rose higher now, small cracks appearing in the grass. Daniel's voice trembled. "You needed my name?" The creature nodded slowly. Victor's head leaned closer. "Names are powerful things for your kind." Daniel's mind raced.
"Why?"
The creature whispered the answer. "So we can call you." Daniel felt his blood run cold. Behind him, the ground outside split open slightly. A pale finger pushed slowly up through the grass. Then another. The creature noticed Daniel staring. Victor's head turned toward the yard. "They are waking now," it said calmly. The soil bulged upward in several places. Hands began clawing their way out of the earth. Gray fingers, broken nails. Dozens of graves across Bramblewood Cemetery were waking, and the creatures beneath them were rising. The thing wearing Victor looked back at Daniel. "We know your name now." Victor's mouth opened slowly, and soon, the creature's limbs unfolded wider, blocking the door completely. "We will know everyone's." Daniel felt the last piece of hope collapse inside him, because the tunnels in the yard were no longer approaching the house. They were spreading outward, across the street, toward the rest of the town. Daniel stood in the doorway of his own house, surrounded by the sound of breaking earth. The town of Bramblewood was waking. Not the people, the graves. Across the yard, the ground continued to split open in thin, jagged lines. Pale fingers clawed upward through the wet soil, dragging themselves slowly into the gray morning air. One hand, then another, and another. Daniel's breath came in short, shallow bursts. The creature wearing Victor's head watched him quietly. "You understand now," it said softly. Victor's dead eyes stared into Daniel's face. "We were always here." Behind the creature, the basement stairs yawned open like a dark throat. The tunnels beneath the house connected to the cemetery. "To every grave in Bramblewood," Daniel whispered, barely audible.
How many?
The creature answered without hesitation. "Enough." Outside, another corpse pulled itself halfway from the earth. A woman Daniel recognized, Mrs. Halpern. She had been buried 2 weeks ago. Now her body twitched violently as something beneath her skin pushed upward. Daniel staggered backward.
No.
Victor's head tilted slightly. "You buried them for us." The creature's voice almost sounded amused. "You gave us doors." Daniel's mind raced desperately. He glanced toward the kitchen table. The letter, Victor's letter, still lying there. Something in his mind clicked. Victor had known. Victor had tried to warn him, but the creature had forced the letter to become a trap. Daniel took a slow breath. Then he did something unexpected. He stepped away from the door. The creature paused. Victor's head turned slightly in confusion. Daniel walked calmly into the kitchen. The creature followed slowly behind him. Its limbs scraped against the floor. "You cannot escape," it said. Daniel ignored it. He reached the kitchen table and picked up the letter again. The paper trembled slightly in his hands. Victor's handwriting stared up at him. "Something is wrong with the place where I am buried." Daniel looked at the final line again. "It knows yours too." Victor hadn't finished the warning. The creature had stopped him. Daniel slowly reached into the drawer beside the table. The creature watched with mild curiosity.
What are you doing?
Daniel pulled out a lighter. Victor's head tilted again. A meaningless gesture. Daniel flicked the lighter open. The small flame glowed softly in the dim kitchen. Daniel looked at the letter one final time. "Victor tried to stop you," he said quietly. The creature made a soft clicking sound. "He failed." Daniel nodded slowly. Then he touched the flame to the letter. The paper ignited quickly. The fire spread across the page, curling the edges inward. The creature suddenly moved forward sharply.
No.
Daniel held the burning letter in the air. "You needed this, didn't you?" he said. Victor's head twitched violently. "The letter brought me here." The flames climbed higher. The creature's limbs slammed into the walls as it lunged toward him.
You were supposed to answer it.
The fire reached the center of the page. The words blackened and disappeared. Daniel stepped backward toward the gas stove. "You needed me to come to the cemetery," he continued. The creature moved faster now. Its limbs crashed across the floor. Victor's mouth opened wide. Daniel turned the stove knob. Gas hissed softly into the air. Outside, more corpses were crawling from the ground. The creatures beneath them were waking, but inside the house, the smell of gas was growing stronger. Daniel held the burning letter above the stove. "You learned Victor's memories," Daniel said. The creature lunged forward. "But you didn't learn everything." Victor's dead eyes widened slightly.
Daniel smiled faintly.
"Victor knew me better than that." The burning paper slipped from Daniel's fingers. It fell, slowly, into the cloud of gas. For a single second, nothing happened. Then the house exploded. Flames burst outward through the windows. The roof lifted violently into the air. Glass and wood scattered across the yard. The creatures crawling from the soil shrieked in sudden chaos as the fire spread across the ground. The tunnels beneath the house collapsed instantly. Dirt caved inward. Dozens of pale limbs vanished beneath falling soil. The creature wearing Victor's body screamed, a horrible sound that echoed across the street. Then the house collapsed completely into flames. Hours later, smoke drifted slowly above the ruins. Firefighters moved quietly around the wreckage. The town of Bramblewood had gathered nearby. People whispered nervously. They had all heard the explosion. Among them stood Sheriff Collins. He rubbed his tired eyes as he looked over the burned remains of Daniel Mercer's house. "Gas leak," one firefighter.
That's what it looks like.
The sheriff nodded slowly. Then something caught his eye. Near the edge of the debris, a small, half-burned piece of paper. He bent down and picked it up carefully. The corner of a letter. Only a few words had survived the fire. Handwritten. The sheriff read them slowly. "If you are reading this," he frowned slightly. ... It means I am already dead." The sheriff glanced around the crowd. Something about the words made his skin crawl. But he folded the paper and slipped it into his pocket. Across the street, the ground shifted slightly beneath the grass. Very slightly. Barely noticeable. Deep underground, far below the ashes of the house, something moved. And somewhere in the darkness beneath Bramblewood, a voice whispered quietly,
Sheriff Collins.